Okay, we shall start. Thank you. We'd like to introduce our speaker, Crystian Cruz, Dr. Crystian Cruz. He's an educator, senior graphic and type designer from Brazil. He's experienced in editorial design, worked as creative director for leading magazines and newspapers in Brazil. He headed typography at Africa, an award-winning advertising agency in South Africa, and he presented talks over 60 design events globally. Let's all welcome Crystian.
Hi everyone, thank you Nada for the introduction. Wearing different hats now. So good morning, good afternoon everyone. This topic I'm going to bring today is the outcome of my PhD research here at the University of Newcastle in Australia, which was the reason that I migrated to Australia in 2017. So as Nada said, I'm originally from Brazil. I'll start just giving a little bit of context to explain the driving force of the project I'm about to show. I have more than 20 years experience as a graphic designer, mostly doing editorial design, which means magazines, newspapers, books, and so on, which included the GQ magazine in Brazil, some newspapers, visual identity for ATypI conferences, and so on. But also had like the practice as a type designer. For initially self-taught, and 10 years later I went to Reading to do the master in typeface design. But mostly I do custom corporate fonts. I never did a retail font whatsoever. And then the only time I actually had the chance to work with both things together, pretty much, was when I was hired to be creative director at the Africa Creative, which is the biggest advertising agency in Brazil. And essentially, I was the head of typography of the agency. So it was just my job essentially was to choose typefaces for like people like yourself, and choose the best fonts for all the campaigns of the agency. I did that for 2 years, but I still feel that something was missing. And as a type designer, I think by the fact of having these two practices as a graphic designer and typeface designer, I was trying to find an approach that is to look at typography as a medium to tell a story. So it's almost like that's my driving force to typography. And so here I can see the one that is animated is a font that I did back in 1999, but only 10 years later I managed to make it animated in a sense that gets condensed at the end of the line, which is, as far as I know, the first font in the world to do that. I think maybe 5 or 6 years later we have the Typotech one that did the same feature. And the one below was my typeface from Reading, Quartzo, which I did as well, bar charts, rating stars, and the same thing. The bar charts feature was done 2 years prior to Chartwell, which is the other font that you know well about creating bar charts. But as I said, I thought that something was missing. Came to Reading to discover what I'll do next in my career. And in that case, I had an epiphany moment that my creative practice was too ephemeral. It means like I was doing newspapers, magazines, you do it, next month you trash it. You do another one, another one, another one. So I was trying to think in a way that if I could use my design practice to actually, as an instrument of critical reflection. So would essentially bring something to society and not just for the corporations that I was working for. So with the mindset of critical design, so it just was the naive idea. So what if I use my topographic skills and design skills to discuss any kind of social issues? And that led me to looking at the emerging field of design activism. So I'll just give you a few examples as a context. Things like some posters from the book From Designer Descent, that you can see where typography is pretty much a medium to tell a story as well. This is a particular project for a colleague in Brazil called Fabio Lopes, that he does a lot of projects that explore social injustice in the city of Rio de Janeiro, which is he's from. And he did like pretty much like a remade the board game Risk as a way to provoke the authorities, because then he replaced all the common places to places that actually the organized crime was taken over. And what happened was that it got so attention from the media that the authorities actually had to make a statement about the fictional game, and he got what he wanted because they started discussing about the social injustice in real. But coming to typography as well, we have cases like Fuse magazine used to do that a lot to bring context, not just like the letter forms by itself. So you can have here the fonts by a few bands, you can read me. More closely to social causes as well, we have the great projects from Seals, the vocal type, which he started in 2016 and is an ongoing project. We have some really specific ones, like Voices of the Wall from 2019. That's pretty much, you type the content and it gets this kind of image-like result. It's not a typeface per se, but it's still use of typography. And then, of course, Jonathan Barnbrook, which is arguably the most iconic case of contemporary design activist. So he does a lot of that now and then. And so he's pretty much using design dissent to bring a political message. Few more cases, Vincent Protest, the same thing as font design for protests, posters, pretty much. So again, this is striking, like imposing a view. And this one as well is called the Tiananmen's Fonts. It was a Kickstarter project back in 2015. Unfortunately, that one wasn't founded, it didn't achieve the goals. But it was like that's one of the things that I like to bring as well. The context is really, really important. In this case, the font was labeled Tiananmen Square, Tiananmen Square, and so on, but actually was talking about the crisis in Spain, which is where Otavio is from. So even if the message is not right, things start to get blurry, so eventually you don't get the results you wanted. So that leads to my take on that. So what I did, as soon as I finished Reading in 2009, I started thinking what I could do. And then I don't know exactly when it happened, but I realized that not a long time ago in Brazil, we had a massive dictatorship from the 60s to the 80s. So then I thought, what can I do about it? Is that something that I can use my skills to discuss it? So what I did essentially, I was looking at how to think. Essentially, I just had the silly idea. I'm going to create a font that censors itself. That's pretty much kind of the silly idea that I started with. And then what happened was that I started looking, researching about this censorship and dictatorship, essentially in Brazil. And then what happened was that after during the regime, there was this massive act that's called the ATypI that actually applies censorship to everybody. So people got murdered, actually. Journalists got murdered by publishing what they wanted. And so it was really chaotic for people to work under those circumstances. So my driving force was actually think on their shoes. So what would be if it was me? If I was working, what would I do? Would I publish what I wanted, or just give it away, or do something else? And just looking around a bit of numbers, so give a context. So here, for instance, this is just a rough estimate of how many songs, books, and so on were censored during that period. This number is still to be defined because a lot of researchers are still looking at the archives. But essentially, what I look at when I look at publications, that's why I thought it was that my take could be in a unique position, is that most of books, they only cover factual narratives. And I thought it was really hard to engage with the topic because it's a really hard topic. You have your own preconceptions about it. So I thought that they didn't deliver even to me as a reader. I couldn't get it, understand the importance of censorship. So this low engagement that came to me, there are two things I took from that. First of all, that I thought visual storytelling could be a good way to solve that. And also bring interactivity, because nowadays everything you have to react. You cannot expect people to do by themselves, so you have to push them. So those two things that are actually what made me go to this project. So essentially that became a PhD research, but became, I would say, because I was already researching that by myself for more than 5 years, and I needed time to research, to look at the archives. So that was the only reason it became a PhD. I'll just give you, I'll tell the typeface, then I'll dive a little bit on the research. So as I said, the idea was to create a typeface that can provoke debate around censorship. Then I thought, okay, I'll just grab a few censor words from a researcher and I'm done. And what happened is nobody researched that. No historian and so on, they look to those lenses. So then I said, okay, I have to do myself. So I've been to the Brazilian National Archives. So they've been only open to the public like 15 years ago, was not that long ago. So essentially, when you land over there, these are the boxes that you can have a look. So you just have to open and say, give me those top 10 boxes. They are roughly labeled, so you can know roughly what is in there. But then you have to spend the whole day looking at what you can find. And here is an example of one of those files. So if you open this for a book, so the whole book was, because this was like a sensorial process to either approve it, let it get published or not. So it was for the whole media. And here are all the reports. So that's somehow was the only beauty, I guess, of being a military dictatorship is that they like to produce documents. And the reason is to legitimate themselves. That's the only reason. By producing documents, it looks official. So by doing that, I was able actually to cover, track down everything they did. So during 3 weeks in total, in many different times I've been there, I took photos of more than 50,000 documents to just look at, to this quest to look at find the image, find the keywords, censor keywords for my project. Yeah, it was kind of a really exhausting experience, but I learned a lot with the process. So now I respect a lot people that look at archives and so on. And just, I won't have the time to cover much of what was done. I just give 2 cases that the musician Chico Buarque, which is one of the all-time famous Brazilian musicians, that he was threatened by the government, and even he left Brazil in 1970 during the regime. He came back 1 year later, but he had a lot of songs that were censored. And then he had to invent even his name, he had to invent a nickname to get his songs approved. Because at some point, every new song he would submit, they would censor, no matter what. So he started getting the nickname, and eventually his songs start to get approved. For the same Chico Buarque, just an example of how the archive works and the censorial process. You can see 2 highlight words in the middle. So those words are actually the words that they allowed, in this case, to change the word to be approved. So instead of being brasileiro, which means Brazilian, he could actually change to batuqueiro, which is a kind of percussionist. Of course, the context is completely different, but in Portuguese, the 2 words look the same. So in that case, the song was approved for being released. Also, a lot of stamps. That's something I was looking also about the visuals by being a designer. But yeah, again, about the research itself, the cases, you can follow on social media. I'll start posting more often some of those cases. But let's dive into the project itself. So one of the main things is also that all the documents were made with typewriter fonts. So that's why I went to that aesthetics. But I'm not going to talk about this today as well. But I did a talk specifically on that on ATypI All Over a couple years ago. You can watch on YouTube my take on the typewriter fonts. But essentially what I did, I got that document that enacted censorship in Brazil, and I digitalized the font, and I made that one exactly the same with trying to get the same mistakes, that the ribbon ink and so on. I replicated that and trying to be as faithful as I could. So bring it up, that font, to be used in my project. And just also a few examples of fonts that are related to my project that I think it's important to acknowledge. I like looking at fonts like Sugar and Spice by Amy, that it goes actually replace content. It's something that I always wanted to do as well, you type some words and get something else. On the opposite direction, I have Some Bullshit Sans, that gets the opposite, just like give you like those buzzwords. So David Sargent yesterday mentioned about, yeah, the cursing words. Here you go, I got mine as well. And 2 other that are also in the same direction. So the top one, gets 26 naughty words, and the bottom one is about being polite. So we replaced some kind of rude words to polite words as well. Has more than 500 words in the database. And the thing is, these 4 projects that I show, they were released before mine, but mine I started the project 5 years prior. So I think that's one of the problems of doing the project for 12 years or so. As you always know, say, I have to release my font. Yeah, the same thing. But actually, I'm just happy that actually the more we have like this, it means that this kind of direction is relevant. And here the same thing, like a scene, like the step phase, I think it's the closest one to my project. That was from 2015 by Emil Kozol. That one was based on the NSA documents in US. That was the reason for this project. And then the database itself, as I mentioned, I got to the point now that I have more than 1,346 censored terms in my database. Most of them I did in Portuguese and English at the moment, but also is a call, is open call if people want to do in different languages. You can assist me in that. And this is the database, essentially creating what the word came from and trying to get them in clusters to see what it makes sense or not. And then I need to put that into a font. Of course, more than 1,000 unique words. If I do it directly, just getting the OpenType pen and start adding, it would be a nightmare. So I have to get assistance. And then, of course, who do I look for? Nobody else better than Rainer. That's something that one of the first stages of my project, he came and said, look, if you need something in the future, let me know. And then when I was in that stage, I reached out to Rainer, and then he helped me out by creating this specific script for glyphs that you can just type the words out in different levels, those 3 levels that I have, which I'm about to show right now. So essentially I have 4 basic main categories. One's a fully redacted, something that is occasionally redacted, that depends on the context. The other is with the topic itself, and the other some unique effects. I'll just break it down in a moment. So just to show in action, so I just like replacing if you just type it over, as soon as you finish typing the word, you get it redacted. And in different levels. So as I said, depends on the category of what it is. Well, those 2 are the basic ones. This is the most fonts have. But I have so much unique situations that I thought it would be important to address as well. So pun an analogy as well. For puns, Wayne Thompson, he loves puns, so that's for you. So in this case, what I did is actually get the stamps, and just to, instead of redacting or anything like that, because that was not censored, but it's just a way to highlight that something was going on. So if you didn't pick it up, the stamp will help you to figure out. So the same thing, as you type this content, the stamps just go over it. We had a lot of names as well that are either being banned because the person was opposing to the regime, or they are protected. So that means they are friends of the military. In those cases, you'll never be allowed to talk about them on the press. So I got all those names as well. So if you type all those 97 names, they get, you get the stamp censored on top of it. And the most fun one is actually when you start getting things like substitution. So the one, if you type the line on top, you just get the one on the bottom. So, of course, I have to explain that the coup started on the April 1st, but the military said it wasn't 31st of March to avoid the joke of the April Fool. So if you type the date, actually in my case, it goes back to April 1st. No matter what, you don't get March 31st. And things like they didn't want to say it was a coup, it was a revolution. So then you get this kind of thing, right? Specific ones as well, really, really specifics. It was just a way to pay homage to them. This is an example of a newspaper that had to have everything that is highlighted in black, had to be replaced in the very last minute. So what I did, and they placed this ad, agora samba, it means now is samba. And I just made that the same way. If you type that content, which is like renounces, then you get that ad on top of it. And this is for that's I think the next level thing. There was a situation that you could not talk about assault unless if the robber gets killed or got in custody. But if he made it, you cannot talk about that on the press. So made in a way that if you type assault, and then it gets this prompt straight after that, and you have to reply yes or no. So if you reply yes, it gets that you're free, and then if you get no, it gets that it was vetoed. So you have those two things that you can actually play around with it. And I started doing some tests with that. The same thing with in Twitter. Twitter was really good for that because it's short. People have to be concise. So how do you deal with that? If you have to be concise, you have to try to find different words to circumvent censorship. I did an exhibition back in 2020 as well as part of the PhD research, which led again to this Twitter experiment, which is essentially was you type the things on that device, and then it will be on the wall straight on Twitter, but you'll see redacted straight away. And just like to finalize some of the of ways that you can actually see the font in use. So that's the Wikipedia entry for Augusto Pinochet, which was a dictator from Chile. So that's, as you can see, he was really, really censored. If you got everything related to him is pretty much prohibited. Even though, and that's the funny thing, because he's not from Brazil, but even though it applies for so many different other circumstances. And the thing is, I used that as I wanted to make this on the web, because I wanted to burst the graphic design bubble. Because it doesn't make sense to be only graphic designers using the font. You have to be something else, so that's what I did. I wanted to create a browser plugin. And I had a look at all of them that were around, so this one on the left is that's one of the many ones that you could just replace font and have something else. And I look at all the browser extensions on Chrome, but none of them served me for what I wanted, so what I actually had to do was to create a new one. And a big shout out to Michael Cuneo from the University of Newcastle, that is a creative technologist that helped me to do that, to create the extension. And I'll finalize just showing how it is that in action. So essentially, for people that are familiar with Chrome extensions, you just install it, and then you can deactivate it anytime you want. So just giving you here a view of how it works. So just there we have a video. So the same thing, if you go to the Chrome store, it's active at the moment. So if you download your computer, you can use it. Mine was, of course, was already installed. And here, just as you can see what happens. If you type on, you become the censor. And then if you type off, you see, yeah, it goes off. And again, this is a way to bring visual storytelling to the table. So let's say if you want to see if the website, like the news that you usually read, if you would be more redacted than others, just open 2 tabs, test it out, see by yourself. ATypI. So, sorry, John Barry, you've been censored. ABC, the biggest, like Wayne's font. Goodbye, Wayne's font. That was my name. And the same thing, so that's from this morning, so you can see how to be like in the real scenario. And also Jason. Sorry, Jason, you got censored as well. Yeah, here you go. That's it. Thank you.
That was great. Full of content, so we have time for only 1 or 2 questions. But hopefully there are 1 or 2. Okay, Paul.
What have been some of the more interesting results of this project that you've been able to observe now that it's been used by other people?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question, because what I want to do is actually open call to other people to collaborate. So it means like it could be in 3 different ways. So one could be either expanding that database of words, expanding mine database, or expand it to other languages. So I can go in both directions. I'm welcome as well to provide what I did as like the process of making that, the methodology for that, and so to other people to do it. So I think, yeah, that's what I would like to do for having people, especially with gamification. I think that's one thing that is, I think, still missing. Because this is pretty much niche as well, still only on Chrome. For instance, a Safari doesn't allow to get custom fonts.
But in terms of like consciousness raising, what type of feedback have you gotten from people who have interacted with this project as kind of users?
Yeah, it was interesting that by the exhibition itself, that of course, like we had a huge community of Brazilians in Newcastle. So in the exhibition, let's say from 200 people, we got like 100 Brazilians, 100 Australians, and other people as well. And it was interesting that all of them got it by looking at, understanding. And I think that's the beauty of it, that you don't have to explain much, even the context of Brazil or whatever it is, but you get the experience by yourself. You get the fact that instead of telling you a story, you become part of the story by using the font. So that's what I got so far. And then especially, you get triggered by why some words got censored. Because that's why, if I'm trying to type something, and if I cannot say any word, say, what's going on in the word? Why the word gets censored? And then without thinking, you start to thinking about censorship, you know? So that's why, or why it was censored. So how arbitrary it is to put that word to get censored or not, and who's the right to do it?
Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
That's our time.